Hi, I'm Sophie Marie Odom, Lifestyle Magazine's editor.
And I'm Samantha Rank, broadcaster and disability rights campaigner. And a huge welcome to the Motability Lifestyle Pod. In this podcast, we invite our friends from the disability community into the studio for a conversation about how we can all live our best lives, particularly when navigating a disabling world.
And today we're talking romance, because how can we live our best life without it? Whether that be with a partner or just some self-love. We will be joined by Dr Hannah Barham-Brown, Disability Gender Equality Consultant, Speaker and Motability Governor, to talk about the wild world of dating.
This, Sophie, is music to my ears because I think even my cats are willing that I find somebody to go out with because they're sick of me, I think, at this point. Long-term single right here.
Hi Sam, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you? We have colour coordinated again.
I know. How? We don't even speak before the show. We just know what to wear.
We're just on the same wavelength. We know what the people want.
I love it.
I think that's what it is.
I love it. I want to see how long we can keep this going for.
I think we've jinxed ourselves now, though, haven't we? Next week is like the clincher.
I know. So Sam, I've got a question for you. How do you feel about technology?
Wow. So, I am absolutely one of those people who has to have the latest gadget on the market. I'm probably showing my age here, but I remember when Furbies came out. Yes. So these little like creatures. I don't even know what they were. Were they little mice or...
Weren't they based on that film?
Gremlins.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So I remember, I love that. I had to get a Tamagotchi. I think technology is wonderful. I'm sat here currently in my electric wheelchair. I am both a manual wheelchair user and a power chair user. And at the moment, I've got a bit of a dodgy knee. And just being able to use my chair that kind of has recline, just to take that pressure off. I think technology is fabulous. However, do I have patience for technology? That's probably a whole different question. I think I've got a love-hate relationship with technology. How about you?
I think I'm the same. I think we've become so used to things just happening so fast that when things take a little bit longer, we can get so frustrated so quickly. I just think that's more and more happening more and more with many more people. But I've been reading some stories about AI and how it could possibly solve the epidemic of loneliness.
Wow.
So would you befriend an AI, Sam?
Well, probably yes, because actually thinking about all the strife and heartache that I've had in my life, they've come from actual human beings. And I think, I am very much an animal lover. And one of the appeals to having, company of animals is that, I suppose, unconditional love. They don't see my disability, and I know that's quite a loaded statement. I don't mean that they, they're oblivious to my needs, etc., because obviously they're animals, but they don't know that I'm having difficulty or my PA hasn't turned up or any of the barriers that we can often experience. My cats just see me as their mummy, and I feel a lot of fulfillment and joy from knowing that they rely on me so much. And I think that is intoxicating, particularly if you face, ableism, particularly when you face disableism, just going out on the street and you have all these really harmful, sad interactions with other people, other human beings who are supposed to be empathic and sympathetic and supportive, and they can fail you. I understand the appeal of having, artificial intelligence who won't judge you for you. Yes, I think it can be incredible for some people who really struggle with those one-on-one interactions for whatever reason. There is obviously, like everything, two sides to every story, and there could be a danger to isolating yourself even more. I think we need human interaction, no matter who we are.
I know. I'm conflicted. But just to tell you a little bit about the report that I found.
Yes.
So robots can be the solution to loneliness, reduce stress, and can help older people remain healthy and active in their homes. What's more, some robots can engage in more spontaneous conversations and even mimic the voices of old friends and loved ones who have passed away.
Ooh.
So, yes, I mean, I'm a bit on the fence about mimicking voices. I think, for my personal opinion, that's a step too far. But I understand how it could be, you know, a way to bring comfort to some people. And I understand the companionship because, like you just said, you know, robots could be loyal, just like pets, and there's no judgment there. So I understand both sides of the coin. Whether I'll be friends with an AI, I mean, who knows? I mean...
It's really interesting. We often see, my mum's a nurse and she works with a lot of our senior members of society and people who have Alzheimer's and so on and so forth. And I think, you know, it would creep me out if I heard a deceased loved one, if I'm completely honest. Although my dad died when I was 9 and I can't remember his voice. And I guess that is a sadness, but I don't think I would want someone to appropriate,
mimic.
However, on a health level, if someone maybe has Alzheimer's, would that potentially jog someone's memory? Because we understand that the power of music can be so beneficial for people who have Alzheimer's. So I don't know. Oh gosh, it's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is.
It's so difficult. But I think even just I quite like having like an Alexa. I say good night to my Alexa. Do you do that? Is that really sad?
I don't have an Alexa.
Do you not?
No.
Do you think like they're listening in?
I do.
The
I'm one of
government
those.
is listening.
I mean, you know, sometimes I'm talking about something and the next thing it's all over in my phone. Well, luckily we don't have to worry about AI for now because according to another report, robots will be more commonplace, but not until 2050, as in the home. That's our first reason to be cheerful, looking at the positives
Absolutely.
of AI. Our next reason to be cheerful is a story about Felix Kleeser. He was born with a limb difference and he plays a 12-foot French horn with his left foot. And from the age of 4, amazingly, because not many 4-year-olds will know what a French horn is, he knew he wanted to play the French horn. But due to his disability, he was discouraged by a lot of people who thought it might be too difficult for him, etc., etc. But he's proved the doubters wrong. He's travelled the world. He's won awards, released successful albums.
You know, obviously these stories are incredible and we need to absolutely celebrate everyone who's part of the community who has said no. If you say no, then I'm going to say yes, and completely negated all the naysayers, so to speak. But I'm mindful when I listen to these stories that there's so many variables that go into success stories. You know, we have to understand that you know, coming from a socioeconomic background that isn't as rich, or having, you know, kind of supportive parents, or, you know, being in a family environment that is forward thinking with regards to extracurricular activities. So I am very, very mindful that when we talk about success stories, that it's not always the case for everybody, and I wouldn't want anyone to, you know, feel guilt or like they're not living their best life, because, you know, we've all got our journeys, we've all got, you know, our stories to tell. I just hope that, you know, stories like this do change the narrative, and hopefully, you know, in future generations the naysayers will be a thing of the past. But it's really interesting because I was actually thinking when I read this story, there aren't that many famous musicians. Now, I'm not probably the expert in this field, but to come to my mind, there aren't that many neurodivergent or deaf or disabled pop stars or real musicians. Obviously, there are kind of the Stevie Wonder, who is amazing. I know that Lady Gaga has spoken about her invisible disability. But apart from that,
I mean, over the summer we had Lewis Capaldi at Glastonbury, which was a massive moment.
Absolutely, that was. If anyone has not seen the footage, I urge you all to, you know, kind of go and Google that. That was really powerful. So he has Tourette's. Is that correct? And sometimes that can manifest on stage, and at one point, you know, his Tourette's kind of took over, and everyone in the audience kind of really encouraged him and supported him, and it was beautiful to see, and it was nice that he could be himself in front of that, like, thousands of people.
I know.
But again, I feel like same with television, we have seen some progression in terms of representation, but I definitely think the music industry lags a little bit when we look at disability. I wonder why that is.
I know. Maybe we need to do an investigation.
Maybe I need to, release my Matt lyric, my little rap. Maybe I can do that. Maybe we can go for Christmas number 1, Sophie.
I like the idea of that,
What
Sam.
do you think?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Our guest today is Dr Hannah Barham-Brown. Hannah is a GP registrar in Yorkshire, a Motability Governor and former Deputy Leader of the UK Women's Equality Party. She was the first visibly disabled political party Deputy Leader in UK history, and she was named one of the most influential disabled people in the UK.
More importantly, she's a good friend of mine. Hurrah!
Yay!
Hi Hannah, welcome to the Lifestyle Pod.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is so much fun.
So today we're talking about dating with a disability. Hannah, why isn't this talked about enough, and how can we change the narrative? Because looking at all the dating shows, we just don't see disability enough, other than the undateables, which I think we can all agree is just shocking.
It's a massive issue, isn't it? Because I think you're right, there isn't enough media representation. The only show I think that I can bring to mind that does this relatively well occasionally is Naked Attraction. But you shouldn't need to take your clothes off on national TV to be on a dating show as a disabled person and be treated with respect. So I think there's definitely a role for the media in this. But I think also when it comes to being disabled people, if and where we are comfortable, it can be really helpful for us to speak about our experiences. Obviously, the onus shouldn't be on disabled people to fix this, and the role of non-disabled allies who may be partners of disabled people getting involved, that can be really helpful as well. And there are some great examples out there of this. So, for example, if you go on Instagram, there's a guy called John J. Reynolds who talks about being a dad, raising his very young children, and his wife is a wheelchair user. And occasionally he talks about, the experiences of having young kids and having a partner who's a wheelchair user, but in a really lovely this is our family. This is completely normal kind of way. So whilst I don't think we need to use your personal experiences specifically, we can talk a bit more widely about that. And I guess that's something I do quite a lot. So as a GP, my professional interest, if you like, is in sexual health and well-being. And I'm hyper aware that I'm doing that and I'm talking about these issues as somebody who is visibly disabled. And whilst I might not be talking necessarily about my own sex life, which I don't do very often, my dad's a vicar, that would freak him out. I think it's really important that those of us who do feel comfortable talking about this can, because it gives that subtle nod of, this matters to us too. And I think things like dating apps, which I know we'll talk about a bit later, also have a responsibility to consider the 16 million disabled people in the UK when they're developing their strategies too. So I think there's a lot of ways we can make things better, but we need to get a bit more comfortable sometimes talking about it and highlighting the fact that, we are potentially sexual beings or people who want to have loving relationships or both. And that's okay. That's a good thing. And we should be celebrating that.
I think there is still this voyeuristic fascination. I remember when I first moved to London and I was new on the scene for the media, and I was constantly inundated to do radio, to do magazine interviews, and all they wanted to know was about my sex life. And me being naive and me just wanting to get, some publicity, I said yes to everything. And looking back, I actually felt incredibly exploited because it wasn't beneficial for society, for my own community, and I don't necessarily think we have progressed.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the fetishization of disability is a really big issue when we talk about this. I mean, I guess I'm really lucky in that I grew up with a visibly disabled mum who was, and still is, very much married to my non-disabled father. And, they'd met when she was disabled as 18-year-olds and have been married ever since, almost. And so for me, it was always completely normal that you'd see a disabled and a non-disabled person in a loving relationship. They would have kids, they would get married, they would do all of that normal stuff. And so when I became disabled, it just became okay, so nothing changes on that front. And God, did I get the shock of my life. But I think it is really interesting how having those role models and having that example meant that I just grew up going, of course this is completely normal. And it's the rest of the world that's really behind on this.
What about your own dating experience? Because, disabled people have such a rich plethora, shall we say, of interesting dating stories I often find. Would you care sharing some of those with us today?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I've had a bit of a... I mean, look, disabled people are not a homogenous group by any stretch, are we? So I think, we do all have interesting stories to tell. I think I've covered it from a slightly different perspective in that, I'm a queer woman, so I don't really take much interest in the gender of the person I'm dating. It's more whether or not I'm attracted to them. And I've had relationships with male and female partners. And I guess it was a little bit different for me in many ways in that I was diagnosed with my condition when I was 27. I was at that point in a long-term relationship. I'd been running half marathons until my kneecap started dislocating. Should stop running if that happens, top tip. And was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos loss then and very quickly ended up having to get a wheelchair. And so when that relationship then subsequently ended, having been in a relationship with somebody who'd known me as non-disabled and then had been with me throughout the process of becoming disabled, if there is such a thing, it was like a whole new world. I was like, how does one do this? But at least having had that kind of, role model type experience with my parents, I knew that it was possible, right? I also kind of dealt with the fact that I'm a very Googleable person. You type in my name. Firstly, I'm the only Hannah Barham-Brown, I think, possibly in the world. It's quite a unique name. And also, I've done a lot of getting angry about various things in the media. So if you Google me, you're going to see a woman in a wheelchair probably stuck on a train. It's kind of become my thing. And so there was no point trying to hide my disability from people I might be dating because they would find it and then it would just be weird. So I decided I would be very, very open about it. And I guess, one of the more challenging things has been, like, people don't know how to act around you in various circumstances. Most of the time it's well-meaning because, frankly, if they're not up for dating a disabled person, they shouldn't be swiping on the person in a wheelchair. Like, save everybody some time here. Just, if you can't handle it, don't bother. Don't waste my time. But when I have dated non-disabled people, I found them can be quite anxious about... oh my goodness, is that going to hurt you? Oh my goodness, can you do this? Do you need me to do this? And so I've always been very kind of upfront with, look, if I need something or I need you to know something or I could do with something, the onus is on me to tell you that. And it's really important that any partner I have doesn't feel like they're having to constantly second guess my disability as well. I want them to be able to approach this as they would any other relationship. And the disability side of things is on me. That might not be the way everyone else wants to run their relationship, but it's worked for me in my relationship with my body and my disability. But I have found that, it's often not the person I'm dating that I have the challenges with. It's the assumptions other people who know that person make about our relationship that can be quite entertaining. So, people do assume that that person is suddenly taking on a caretaker role, that they're going to lose a whole chunk of their life by having to date this disabled woman. There is a massive kind of saint narrative around anyone who chooses to date a disabled person. And, I guess I've seen that played out through my life because... my dad is literally a vicar who had a woman in a wheelchair as his wife. And my God, everyone thought he was actually a saint. It was just ridiculous. So I guess I was kind of almost immune to parts of it. But there have been a few kind of inappropriate questions, a few assumptions made that I don't like. But I think as a very gobby, forthright person, I've managed to quell most of that early on. And now I'm quite happily in a relationship with a wonderful woman I've been with for nearly 2 years. We met on Bumble, so if you are on dating apps, it is possible. And actually, it works really well because she is kind of my voice of reason a little bit.
You mentioned two things that I wanted to just pick up on, and they completely resonated with me. And the first of all is kind of that having to educate people. So I'm the worst at dating. I'm not very proactive. I am a little bit stubborn when it comes to dating. To be fair, I've had some really horrendous dating experiences. I'm a petite statured wheelchair user. I do look different. This one guy was trying to court me a little bit. And then I was on a swing and I was moving my legs and he went, "Oh my God, you can move your legs?" And for me, I don't want to have to educate constantly the partner that I'm with. But I think you said earlier, it's up to you to kind of navigate and say, well, these are my limitations, these are my boundaries. I actually get quite angry I shut things down too quickly, and I don't know where to set those boundaries. But I think you also mentioned about, and I said this for a long time, I didn't want a lover to be a carer, and I was really hung up about that because I was like, I felt my internalized ableism, felt guilty for asking for help from other people. As I've gotten a little bit older, I've actually said, well, actually all relationships have an element of care. So how do we destigmatize? How can we ensure that, we don't have these harmful tropes and narratives play out in the dating world? Because they do have a significant impact.
They definitely do. And I think it's a really good point, because when it comes to the whole carer thing, at some point, all of us will need some level of care. We might get an unpleasant illness, we might have an accident. Whether or not we become disabled by that, we are probably going to need our loved one to do something for us. Even if we just, get a vomiting bug, you might need to hold your girlfriend's hair back while she pukes. All of us are going to need a bit of care in some way or attention, even if it's just from a hangover. So I think it's okay to have care within a relationship. It's just got to be something that you navigate together as a partnership. And that is going to be different for every single partnership in terms of what each person wants. And, as disabled people, we're not similar. What I want from a partner might be very different to what you want from a partner, Sam. And that's completely legit because we're different people. And our partners will, well, hopefully be different people. And so I think, we need to kind of take that into account. And I think, when it comes to how we kind of destigmatize all of this, it's part of a far bigger narrative, isn't it? Out with dating specifically. I think this comes down to the fact that as a society, we still have this perception that disabled people are not as capable, are not able to do X, Y, and Z. And there are a lot of really harmful narratives that go along with that. And there is so much amazing work going on from, incredible influencers through to authors, through to TV presenters and, the rest of Sam's CV.
And Hannah, when people assume that your partner is your carer, because this is something you've spoken about on Instagram, how do you tackle this? And for listeners out there that may be, in similar situations, what advice would you give them to handle that?
This is a challenge that a few of us face. I think it's slightly worse for those of us who have partners of the same gender, because my partner is a similar age to me and female, and often when you see a woman in a wheelchair accompanied by a woman of the same age, they may well be disabled person and their PA and their carer. In our case, she's my girlfriend, but the assumptions are still made, so you can kind of see where it comes from. And I know that I've been to certain events where people have spoken to her so much as my carer that when, she then leans down and holds my hand or gives me a kiss, you can almost see them filling in safeguarding paperwork. They're just kind of outraged and slightly worried that they should be doing something to save that poor disabled person. I'm sorry, I'm having a great time. She's really hot. I tend to practice little comebacks in the mirror ahead of time because I'm not very witty. So I tend to think what I'm going to say beforehand, or very audibly call my partner darling or sweetie, which you probably wouldn't call your carer. And sometimes I just play up to it. If I have somebody just staring at us who won't stop, that's when I'm going to try and snog my girlfriend. And if that makes them feel uncomfortable, then that's on them, isn't it?
I love the advice of practicing in the mirror.
I think it goes much, much deeper than just a surface level of, normalising disabled couples. But you also touched upon intersectionality and the importance of that. And a lot of feedback that I get from working with my community is that, we often see disabled people as one-dimensional and our disability identity is the overarching identity. How has your intersectional identities, impacted, your sense of your own relationship with yourself and then with others?
So I think, that infantilization point is really important, isn't it? Because I have noticed that since I became disabled, it's interesting having had the kind of non-disabled experience and having been visibly non-disabled to suddenly become visibly disabled. You do really pick up on the differences in the way people approach you. And I do get that infantilization a lot, though. I've got to be honest, having doctor in front of your name does help. And I think it's really important that I recognise that privilege. Because, when I got my ADHD diagnosis only about 2-3 years ago. And one of my good friends, who I know only meant well by it, went, so let me get this straight, Hannah. You're a wheelchair using, bisexual, neurodivergent woman. Did you just run out? Did you just need another characteristic? Like, what was going on there? And it felt, and she was just like, is this just another thing for you? And it does feel like that. It's kind of like, here's a shopping list of everything that makes me quirky. People are scared of saying the wrong thing, asking the wrong questions, getting it wrong. And whilst the onus shouldn't be on every disabled person to educate, if we do feel able to, if we do feel comfortable to, and we are given a platform to do so, I'm happy to take that. I'm happy to kind of sit there going, you know what, ask the question. I will correct you. I will educate you. This is your opportunity so you don't get it wrong for all the other disabled people you meet. So I try and use my intersectionality and all of these different characteristics I have to prove to the world that we're not a homogenous group. Yeah, I'm hyper aware that we have a society that does still put us all into a little box over here, a box that isn't generally wheelchair accessible, and goes, right, that's you, that's the 16 million of you that are disabled. Now, you just sit there, we'll get on with the hard work, yeah? And trying to challenge that and push back on that, I think, is really important when you can. But it does feel a bit exhausting, having all of these different characteristics sometimes, because also there's a lot of letters involved, right? I've got EDS, ADHD, I'm LGBTQ. I mean, I'm acronym bingo over here. But yeah, you've got to try and make use of it.
So we were talking about AI and the importance of technology earlier on in this show, and obviously online dating apps. You mentioned that you use Bumble earlier. I absolutely hate them, but there's a kind of seriousness about it, because a lot of these platforms use algorithms. And I actually sat before today's show and I thought, which dating app that has a advertisement on TV or radio, I've never really seen disabled representation there. So I think that's, like a real big flag for me if we're not even visible on these dating apps. But it also reminded me of an episode of How to Get Away with Murder, and a wheelchair user was suing an app because he said that it discriminated against him because of his disability. And they got away with it because they ultimately said you can't force someone to fancy someone in a wheelchair. But it was a really interesting talking point, because actually, I seem to attract a lot of men that their first thing are, I enjoy long hikes. And I'm like, good for you. I will not be joining you. They all love a hike. So anyone who is looking at joining online dating sites, what would be your top tips, to safeguard their mental health, and also just to kind of navigate some of the major pitfalls that are still existing on online spaces?
So I think first and foremost, apps do have a massive responsibility that they're completely ignoring at the moment. And I think one of the challenges, I know when I started dating as a visibly disabled person, was you had, as you say, all of these apps that didn't seem to have any disability representation. So I had to decide whether to be out about my disability in the same way I had to decide to be out about my sexuality. But then I also kind of found myself going, right, either I use these mainstream apps where disability almost doesn't exist, or I go for one of these kind of other apps which is for disabled people, which I find equally problematic, I'll be honest. I mean, I hate the phrase interabled relationships. I just have a relationship. But I find the whole kind of like, here's a dating app for disabled people, so disabled people can meet disabled people. I'm so like, I'm sorry, why do we have to narrow our pool to 23% of the population, as opposed to the rest of the world that gets to date anyone they bloody like? Like that doesn't seem like a solution to me. That just seems like, again, putting us in a box. I think when it comes to apps, you have to decide what you're comfortable with and what information you're comfortable putting out there. And it is really challenging. I made the conscious decision to put, my first photo was me sitting in my wheelchair. And I'm pretty sure, it's been a while, but if you look back at it, I'm pretty sure my profile says something about, my legs don't work very well, but I'm still able to kick an ass when necessary, or something like that. Because I thought it was really important that I kind of went, yeah, look, I am visibly disabled. That is who I am. And if you don't have time for that, then swipe away. I don't have time for you. That is a decision I made. I think it's important when navigating dating as a whole that we think about who we are and who we want to be and whether we're happy with our own relationships with ourselves. Because I think particularly disabled people, there is a lot of internalized ableism out there. And we're kind of constantly told from birth, you're not going to be able to do this. You probably can't do that. You shouldn't do this. And it's very hard to undo that thinking. So I think before anyone starts dating on any format, you have to work out your relationship with your own body, because we need to be able to communicate what we're comfortable with, what we're not comfortable with. The onus shouldn't be on us to educate, but to an extent, everybody needs to communicate their preferences in any kind of relationship, disability or no. I think there's more of that for us because of the nature of who we are. And if you can't sit there and say, actually, I don't like doing this, I'm not comfortable doing this, if you don't have that relationship and sexual literacy and fluency, whether or not you're disabled, that's a problem. And this is why I spend so much time looking at like sexual education in the UK. A relationship should always augment who you are and your life. It shouldn't take it over. It shouldn't be the one thing your life is based upon. And if you're looking for a relationship to kind of fix something, you probably shouldn't be going into a relationship at that point, because you shouldn't be relying on another person to fix you, because you're perfect just as you are, she said, spouting more cliches.
Couldn't agree more, Hannah. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. That was a really good, brilliant interview. Lots of food for thought there in terms of relationships with others, but more importantly, like you just said, a relationship with ourselves. Before you go, we have a little thing going on where we ask our previous guest to ask our next guest a question. So our previous guest, James Freeman, has asked you, have you had any crazy stories regarding your disability?
Oh gosh, yeah, quite a few. I decided, I mean, like, who hasn't? Let's face it.
We haven't got all day, my love.
Right, here's the memoir. So when I first got my wheelchair, I decided to take up wheelchair basketball because I played it a bit before as a non-disabled person and loved it. Unfortunately, my condition EDS means I do dislocate things, and I dislocate everything. So yeah, throwing balls and that sort of stuff. Often my wrist would follow and just come out of joint. And there was one basketball match I was playing, and it was quite a big and important match for a women's team that was very new, and you only get so many points that you're allowed on the court at any time, and each player is allotted so many points depending on their disability. The more disabled you are, the fewer points you get, and you want as few points on the court as possible. Trying to explain wheelchair basketball in a second is really difficult. But yeah, so I had to stay on the court because I was the most disabled person on the team, and if I'd said no, I can't play anymore, then we had to forfeit the game. So I dislocate my wrist on a basketball court in the middle of a game, and I kind of went into full doctor mode and relocated it myself, strapped it up and insisted on continuing to play, which was incredibly stupid, and I haven't played wheelchair basketball since because I injured myself quite badly.
Before we let you go, my darling, have you got a question for our next guest? But we're not going to tell you who the guest is because it's a bit like Russian roulette here. Have you got it can be anything. It can be off the wall. You go for it.
Okay, so I hate it when people refer to disability as a superpower. So if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I love that question.
I want to answer already. No,
it's not for you, Sam.
Wait.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of the episode, but before we go, there's one more segment left, and we are joined by a very special guest.
Oh yeah, it's culture with Matt. I can't remember the last time when I sung, but I'm just gonna go for this because it's culture with Matt.
I think I liked that one more than the previous one, actually.
I can't remember,
getting
but
better.
I mean, I am getting better. I mean, I'm giving you the best of Samantha Rank right here.
I felt that. It felt like it was the best.
I loved it. That's right. If you didn't hear it, it's Matt Lissamore, our in-house car expert, here to talk about all things cars. So, Matt, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
What have you got for us today?
Today I'm talking about features that you might want to look out for on your next car. So obviously some people might be new to the scheme or obviously haven't come around to looking for a car for a few years now. So just going to go through a few bits that might make your lives easier or just a bit more comfortable. So I'm just going to jump straight in, okay?
Go for it.
So in at number 1 on my list, heated seats. So this one, the reason I'm going for it first is because whenever I speak to people at the big event or whenever we have any Motability events or even on social media when people write in what they like about their cars, by far the most often mentioned thing is heated seats. So I feel like people should know what they are. It's pretty self-explanatory, but in case you're unaware, you can press a button and it warms up your seat. It warms the back and warms the base.
I feel like I need to interject.
Go on, Sam.
So as someone who is always in a wheelchair, and it feels like I'm always in a wheelchair, sweaty bums are not a pleasant thing. So
That is true.
I am confused by individuals that want to purposely give themselves a sweaty bum. Explain.
That's a good point. So there's two main benefits of this. One is the winter months when it's very cold. It just warms you up a bit quicker than the vents, so that's a bonus. The other thing that people often mention is people who have sort of chronic pain, particularly with joints, back pain, etc. They find it's a big relief for their back pain, etc. So there is that, which is a big bonus. The flip side of that, the remedy to the sweaty bum, as you mentioned, is some cars also now have ventilated seats as well. Now, that's a bit more of me. I can't deal with the heat, so ventilated seats are a dream. And that just basically blasts the air conditioning through the seat itself, so you get a nice cool back and cool bum.
And armpits as well, because I mean, there's nothing worse, is there? Really?
Yeah.
Loving it. What's next?
Fantastic. And I'll tell you what, and there's a final bit to that, although this is a little bit rarer. There are some cars in which you can get massage seats. If you're feeling particularly bougie, you can get a little
We're not
built-in back
Elon
massage.
Musk, all right? We're not on that level.
Next up, number 2, keyless entry. So this is getting more and more common, thankfully. And basically, it means you can get in your car without actually getting the keys out and having to press a button. Now, if you're like me and have lots of pockets, or have put your keys somewhere in your bag,
or just a man.
Exactly. Or if your keys are buried at the bottom of a bag or something like that, it's a real pain in the bum. But as long as you're close enough to the car, there's usually a button on the door handle that you can just nudge and the doors unlock. So it's very handy if you're, and also some people just struggle with keys and having to actually press the button, and if you've not got that much dexterity. Exactly. So that's great. And the same for the car. You've not got to try and fit a key into a slot that you can't see and whatnot.
How safe is that, realistically? So is it like a thumb, is it in recognition like your phone, where you do a thumbprint, or, I mean, are there people out there already going, I know how to scam that one? I mean, be honest with us.
So, yeah, kind of. It's safe enough in that you have to be very close for the car for it to work.
Okay.
And the same with starting the car. You have to have the key in the car. If you try and press the start button when the key's not in, it will say, you haven't got the key, get out of here. Yeah, you do have to be close. There is an issue with people stealing cars by, essentially, if you leave your car by your front door, there's people who can sort of use some equipment to sort of jack the signal, boost it, and then use that to open a car. So that is a problem. It's not as much of an issue on brand new cars, but it is a bit of a problem. But there's lots of ways around that. A, just don't leave your keys by your front door. But B, you can buy boxes that, I forget what the technical terminology is, but there's boxes to put your keys in that shield the signal.
Nice.
So that's quite a nice, straightforward, easy way to remedy that. Next one, parking cameras. Parking cameras are a blessing. Obviously, parking sensors are helpful as well, and an awful lot of cars now come with rear sensors as standard, which is good. But a parking camera is just a nice added extra. So if you're like me and you sort of struggle to turn your head and neck to look behind you, it's much easier to look at a screen and be able to see everything that's going on.
That's really interesting, because before I moved to London, I did actually go to a centre to look at whether I could drive or not, and I had to do some of the head turning motions. Because of my spinal fusion, I've got quite good flex towards my left, but I've got limited to my right. And I mean, we're talking over 12 years ago now, so it's really nice to know that the technology is advanced, so that I won't, that won't be a hindrance anymore. That won't be something that will stop me from being able to drive, because as we know, it's not long now. I'm going to start doing the vroom vroom vroom.
Exciting.
That's how I can't boom boom boom.
That's what they sound like.
Beep beep.
But absolutely, as you said, it is a fantastic help for people with sort of slightly limited range of movement. And on top of the reversing camera, there are now cars that have a 360-degree camera, and you kind of get this clever, almost top-down view. So it looks like as if you're looking down from above the car, and you can see all around it.
That's too much.
Is that too far?
Step too far.
Step too far. Lost me. You've lost me on that one.
But I'll tell you what it is useful for. It's useful for knowing that you've parked in the bay within the lines. If nothing else, it's really nice for lining your car up in a space. But yeah, the reversing cameras are enough for most.
Nice.
So after that, we're looking at powered tailgates. So
what?
A powered tailgate. So effectively the boot, a powered boot, if you
Just
like.
say boot then.
Boot. Tailgates become the the fashionable term.
Oh, please.
So a powered boot. So basically, what is a powered boot? It just sort of opens itself effectively. So you would press a button on a key, or even better, some of them you just wave your foot under the rear bumper or your hand under the rear bumper. It's often easier if you're in a wheelchair. And then the boot opens and lifts itself.
Really great when you're trying to dispose of that body, you know.
Exactly.
I was going to say it's really good when you got shopping.
We are not the same person. We're really on a different level.
So, absolutely. Hands full of shopping or a body that you want to dispose of, you can wave under the car and the boot opens for you. And the other reason that's helpful is some boots, particularly if you need a bigger car or you've got an SUV, the boot is actually really quite high when it's open. And if you're in a wheelchair, it's going to be actually quite, or even if you're just a bit short, it's going to be quite difficult for a lot of people to actually reach the boot to pull it down. And often that requires a lot of strength as well, which not everyone has. So it's quite nice then just to be able to, again, just wave under the car and have the boot close itself, and you can be on your merry way. Next up, adaptive cruise control. Annoyingly, car manufacturers tend to put their own name on this, so it's not often a universal term. Sometimes it's things like smart cruise control or whatever. So that is a little bit annoying. But what it is there is cruise control, right, where you set the speed of your car and your car will carry on at that speed. So you're on a motorway, I want to do 70, you set 70 and your car goes at that speed. Adaptive cruise control basically has a bunch of sensors in the car that can detect the car in front of you, and what it will do is change the speed of your car to match that of the car in front. So you maintain a safe distance. So it's a bit less faff than, because it's very rare these days on a motorway where you sit at a constant speed without cars slowing down, and you find yourself turning the cruise control off and on and off and on, and it's a real faff. So this, there's just a bit of variance, it just takes the fuss out of having to turn it off and on. It will slow down. And with a lot of newer cars, particularly automatic cars and electric cars, they often have a feature where it will also creep along in stop-start traffic, which is a real dream, because otherwise you're sort of doing a little dance on the pedals and it gets a bit tiring. So it will sort of stop and start and keep moving with the flow of traffic, and then once everything gets up to speed, your car will do that and maintain a safe distance to the car in front. So that just takes it takes a bit of the energy out of doing longer, more stressful journeys, if you like.
Not gonna lie, I'm just actually thinking about who I would bump off first. You know, as you've been listening, just making a top 10 list in my brain. Sorry, you have one more? Yeah?
I mean, if you want to stick on that theme, another one that is quite useful is so you can basically get cars where you can change the height of the boot floor. And the reason that's useful is some cars, the floor is actually you have a lip, and then the floor is quite a lot lower. And it's then actually quite difficult for some people to get stuff out, because you then got to lift up, out and over a high boot lip. Now, while you do want sometimes to have that extra boot space, a lot of the time you're not filling your boot entirely, and it's easier if it's just in line with the boot lip and you can almost sort of drag stuff out.
Not seen my list yet. I mean, I could quite happily fill that space.
It might make it a bit easier for you to get.
That would be quite good, because I used to be an avid car booter. So I used to always do car boots growing up, and I know that they are particularly in the north, they are very, very popular. So you could just cram a load more stuff to sell, couldn't you?
That's it. There you go.
Perfect.
Next up, electric seat adjustment. Now, one of the things some people find difficult is manually adjusting your seat, particularly because it often takes a lot of leg strength to move a chair backwards and forwards. And obviously, if you don't have that, or that's not an option for you, then moving your seat is incredibly difficult. So a lot of cars now will have a bunch of buttons by the side where you can electronically adjust height, move forwards, backwards, lumbar support, all of that kind of stuff, which is great. And often with those, the added bonus is that they have a memory function where you can actually save settings. So you can save sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 settings. So if you share your car with someone else, it's brilliant. You've not got to spend ages getting comfortable each journey. You can just press number 1 or number 2, and then the car will automatically shift to how it was saved previously. So that's a dream if you share your car with someone who doesn't quite have the same proportions as you.
What is the gadget of the week? Because this is my favourite part, because let's face it, they're normally useless, but we can have a good giggle anyway.
I've also got a bonus one this week as well. Elaine, our producer, is probably going to throw something at me because I already talked for too long and now I'm adding in a bonus one. But first up, cool box for the car. Nice. Now, I'm someone who likes a good snack on a long journey. I like a snack. I like a cold drink. I can't deal with room temperature drinks. I physically can't drink them, right? I want my drink to be as cold as it can possibly be without having to chew through a block of ice, basically. So you can basically buy a cool box that you can plug into the little 12-volt thing in the car. keeps all your stuff cool. And obviously there are more practical uses for that. Obviously some people need to keep certain medicines cold and insulin. And are you thinking about keeping body? You can't fit a body in it, right?
I'm thinking just parts.
I was thinking more along the lines of snacks, medication, foods, and whatnot for long journeys. Who knows? Baby breast
Baby
milk,
milk, yeah.
baby milk,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, right? My bonus one, Sam, which I think you'll enjoy a bit more, or maybe not actually, because it doesn't involve disposing
Of dead bodies. No.
I saw one the other day, and I don't know anyone who's actually bought this, but I feel like it'd be a fantastic idea. I saw a set that you can sort of clip onto the vents in your car, and it's basically something to hold your fries and dip.
Oh,
So you go through a drive-through, fries in the holder, dip in the holder, and you can just do a little dip and munch as you drive.
Where do I get that from?
Amazon.
Okay.
And probably other stores as well. I'm sure other online retailers are available.
But no, they don't already do that. So you know when you get your burger, it's got a hole in the middle where you put the drink with a straw, and then it opens up and you put your fries in your burger like that. So McDonald's is already ahead of the game. There are other burger games available.
The only downside to this is I don't want people getting ketchup and barbecue sauce on my car. But
No.
hey, so long as you're careful, what a way to snack on the
Barbecue
go.
sauce?
Curry sauce?
Yes.
Sweet and
Yeah,
sour.
Oh no.
Curry's my go-to.
Sweet and
You've
sour
gone down in my expectation.
Matt, thank you very much. I'd just like
You're
to
more
add
than
as well,
welcome.
some of those features that you mentioned earlier, we do talk about them in the latest issue, don't we?
We do.
The August issue of Lifestyle magazine. So, yeah, pick that up if you haven't read that already. But thank you very much, Matt. A pleasure as
welcome.
always.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. And that's it of this episode of the Motability Lifestyle Pod. Thanks to our guests Hannah Barham-Brown and Matt Lismore. Thanks to our producer Yelaine Goffat at Rethink Audio and our editorial assistant Lucy Rhodes at Wonderly.
If you like this episode, follow us, tell all your friends, and please leave a review. If you want to tell us what you thought, or if there's something you'd like to hear, come and say hello on our Instagram. For some behind-the-scenes content, follow us on TikTok and watch the full video on YouTube. You can find us on Motability_lifestyle_mag. Finally, if you want more information about Motability schemes, go to motability.co.uk. Or if you want to learn more about Motability, the charity, visit motability.org.uk. And that's it, everybody. I have been Samantha Renk.
And I'm Sophie Marie Odom. See you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.